So Record of Ragnarok chapter 90, and this is absolutely insanity. We start off right where we left off last chapter. Obviously we had the big backstory of Susano, but we also saw Susano take a serious blow from Okita, and he was rising back up, insinuating something serious was coming now that he'd been hit like that. We start the chapter with all this aura clouding around Susano. Shrouded in an extraordinary sword aura, the Onigiri, Ame no Murakumo, and the stance of that sword god wielding that extraordinary sacred treasure truly are uncommon and bizarre. With an absolutely insane panel of Susano. The aura for Susano, you could honestly argue, is the best in the series, but it's rivaled by his competitor, as you're going to see going forward. Even when you look at these panels, you can see that Okita is noticing this ain't what he had been seeing. This is something completely new, and clearly he's rattled. With that said, we see Susano load back this stance where he holds the sword in one hand, and the sword is much smaller than I thought, and he stays absolutely still. We get this really cool shot of Susano with his hand outstretched toward Okita as he basically taunts him to come forward. We see Heimdall go crazy. He says, "What in the world is that stance?" Susano confronts the demon child with a bizarre stance. Susano says, "Isn't this amazing, Okita? The ace up my sleeve." Dialogue only true swordsman could have. Understanding and respecting the fact that Okita 100% undoubtedly understands what he is facing at this point. Okita doesn't back down. A smile crosses his face and he steps forward like the menace he is. Such an amazing sword aura, he thinks. The crowd says an amazing stance, but I think I've seen it before. Indeed, it looks like it's the very image of Susano no Mikoto depicted in the cotton paintings passed down through mythology. Another cool mural. We saw Susano get some murals earlier in the fight. We also saw Raiden and Shiva get these. We then cut to Sasuke and Musashi, who are proving to be invaluable in this fight for explanations, and it's great to see them. I really appreciate how the usual suspects like Zeus and Ares, Hermes have kind of taken a backseat this fight and really just let us get the explanation from the master swordsman in the verse, Sasuke, and Musashi, who was on par with him or greater than him in his actual life. It's a small little detail that I think really makes this fight even better. Sasuke says, "Is that a one-hit kill stance the moment he enters his fighting range?" Musashi says, but I've never seen a stance like that in any school. Although the essence of that technique seems similar to Ae. What is Ae? Says Harist. Sasuke says, yes. As its characters say, it's about standing still in the place you are, and then match the movement of the approaching opponent and cut them down with one single strike, a fighting style whose strength is the defense. Musashi then says, but that stance in particular seems different from the Ae we know. That's a completely different thing. I really like the paneling here, as we see Susano still standing still with his hand outstretched with the blood on his fingers. We then cut to Susano's siblings and a surprise that we're gonna get to. Tsukuyomi screams out, "Vulgar, vulgar, vulgar." Don't forget, he was obviously opposed to his brother going and getting taught by humans or even associating with humans in general. He says, so Susano is using that technique at last, a technique that was developed and honed alongside humanity. Just the thought of this is enough to make me shudder. We then see Amaterasu, who was more willing to allow Susano to go, but she did banish him, and she says, this is going to be a sight to behold. Sano's secret technique is amazing, And then sitting behind these two is the big dog, Izanagi, the creator god who they didn't want to show us last chapter for whatever reason with a full panel of his face, full reveal. We get the full reveal. We see him in all his glory. He is what seems to be the chief god of this pantheon, the head honcho. No word whether or not he's a primordial or not, but like I said in my spoiler video, primordials are supposed to be dead. So if he was a primordial, he'd have to be an exception to that rule. It makes more sense probably at this point that he's just their Zeus, apparently. He actually gets some dialogue too. He laughs at his son and he says, now, what are you going to do about this little guy? Talking about Okita. This is cool, man. The way he was sitting was really awesome. So Susano's aura continues to cloud the sword. Okita says, that's an interesting stance. Once I'm within your striking range, you'll cut me in half. Isn't that right? However, you won't lay a single hit on me. Absolute confidence from Okita at this point still, which is interesting to say the least. Is he bluffing? Who knows? And Susano comes back with, we'll see about that. Okita starts charging forward head on, runs right towards Susano, but at the last second he keeps backing away. So he basically keeps going like a cat, jumping in, jumping back out, jumping in, jumping back out. Every time at the last second, it's as if he's toying with them, says Heimdall. Okita is constantly moving in and out of Susanoo's striking range. Is this a strategy to avoid being targeted by Susano and wait for an opportunity to strike him? Questions Heimdall. And we see this montage of panels where it actually even looks like Okita has after images, but it might just be the paneling of him dodging in and out from each angle. Then we also see that he cannot find an opening no matter where he goes. Susano's stance remains untethered. Okita comes to the realization that just by looking at this technique, he can see that there are no openings for him to strike. We get this panel of Susano's hand, which seems to be outstretched over the entirety of the battlefield, encapsulating just how much range Susano has. It's almost like an infinite range. There's no openings whatsoever. Any angle Okita tries to strike from, he is going to be cut. As expected of Okita, says Susano with a wide grin on his face. But against this, any attempt to read distance is useless. He said, you fearlessly approach, but you cannot crack the code. Susano winds back the sword even further, and this time, Okita realized the attack is actually underway. Susano unleashes, screams out, ready to go, and Okita jumps back quickly, but it's not enough. At this distance, this should be impossible. There's no way Susano could reach him from that far away. We get this absolutely incredible panel of Okita's hair flipped up as he looks on as the attack is coming his way. Completely at a loss for words at how this is even going to be something that's conceivable. Susano's attack strikes out and extends far past the reach of his sword, almost like a wind slash. And it reminds me of Sukuna's world-cutting slash. Okita initially attempts to try to block it, but there's no blocking this slash. And it's revealed to us that at the last second, Okita rolled with the strike, akin to like what a boxer would do when he rolls with a punch. Otherwise, he would have been straight up cleaved in half. If he tried to block it head on, he would have been cut in half. But he rolled with this strike. The panels here are crazy, dude. Obviously, already one of the best arenas, best stages, with the ambiance, with the moonlight in the back. But in the night sky, with the town nearby, you see the scale of this slash and what it does. It's one of the coolest moments we've had. We then see Susano finally rest after the strike is completed. He blows out the air. Secret technique, reverse heavenly demon. One of my favorite panels of Susano right there too. But this sword slash didn't just stop at Okita. It crushed the city. The damage was so great. The Shinshin Gumi, and especially Kondo, are extremely worried about what they're gonna see when the dust settles. Is it possible that Okita truly avoided the brunt of that attack? As you see, the city is just in ruin behind Okita. He completely wiped out an entire chunk of the city with one sword slash. Heimdall screams out, what in the world? At this point, I have no idea what's happening. The sword god single slash cleaved through the city of Kyoto. We see Okita on the ground, and all he can do is look with no words. He just looks in Susano's direction in disbelief. A far cry from his statements of, you're not gonna land a single hit on me. Motherfucker was humbled in this moment. You see the crowd react. Amazing Susano. Now the view really improved. Which is actually funny as shit, because I always wonder, I'm like, bro, how are they looking at this fight? Because it's such a huge arena. They got monitors, obviously, but now part of the city's gone, so now the view is even more clear. Sasuke watches on with satisfaction. His Valkyrie wrist says, such a wide attack range, what kind of ability is that? And Sasuke chuckles and says, nah, that wasn't an ability. That was just a strong and fast swing of his sword. There wasn't nothing special to that. He just swung his sword and that's what it caused. All that devastation was simply just a basic slash from Susano. Nothing added, nothing needed. That's it. Wrist is in disbelief. She says, no way his swing just did that. With tremendous speed and force, the sword was swung, tearing through the air and creating a vacuum sword at the tip of the sword. It's like his sword stretched out. Exceeding its natural range, he managed to slice through Okita and the streets of Kyoto. Is it possible to do such a thing when you master the sword, says Wrist. Sasuke says, if only it was easy like that. That blow was only possible because of Susano and that sword. Perhaps for us humans, an unimaginably long time, 100 years, 1,000 years, or even more. Perhaps he simply swung his sword relentlessly. It must take a deep love for the sword and the sword's love in return in order to achieve such a feat. So I think what he means to say there is that if a human were to be able to do that, it would take them 10 lifetimes, basically. It would take them 1,000 years or even more to be able to achieve something like that. But in Susano's case, he's special. It was much easier for him. And that comes from the deep connection with the sword. You see Okita rise back to his feet at this point, and Susano's impressed. You reacted to my attack on your first try. You rolled sideways to deflect the vacuum blade, didn't you? As expected from the strongest manslayer of the Bakumatsu. Okita just looks at him. Susano continues, if you would have tried to block it directly, you'd have been cleaved in half. And Okita agrees. He thinks to himself without speaking this out loud to Susano, if I had been even a moment slower to react, I would have been undoubtedly destroyed, cut into pieces. He's impressed with Susano as we see that Okita's arm is ravaged. The arm he tried initially blocking with and rolled has been cut all the way up and down. Susano goes back into his stance and says, what's the matter? Even the demon child is afraid now? Okita collects himself. A smile crosses his face. Sorry about that. The sound of my racing heart is surprisingly pleasant. If you guys remember his Onago technique, he pumps the blood into his body, makes him stronger, faster, everything. But this is something different. We see what looks to be Conqueror's Haki emitting off Tsuji. There's lightning coming off the ground at this point. The aura of the demon child is immense. He says, I am glad. I am glad that I accepted this fight to the death after all. Thanks to you, it feels like I am burning more and more as his eye is revealed to us now, and it looks as if the whites of his eyes have evaporated, burned, seared off his body. The veins in his face look like they're going to explode. His heart is beating faster now than ever before. The blood in his system is racing through his body. I think I can do this. Shinsengumi is at a loss. They can't even get their words out. They say, hey, Tsuji, he's acting weird. His eyes are glowing redder than usual. Damn, it looks just like a demon. As the aura that comes out of Susano's eyes, usually that small streak, now they're thick streaks that look like demonic horns coming out of both eyes. The aura around his sword is now a blackened, dark aura. All through his cloak, his body screams out in agony, what seems to be burning, a burning body, as we see the streaks through his arm, the damage dealt to him, with perhaps the widest grin you've ever seen, a demonic smile. It almost looks as if he's straight up levitating. He might be levitating at this point. This man might have just transcended everything, and now his sheer aura alone has sprung him into the air. This is actually insane. Susano says, I am surprised to think there was something beyond Onago. I told you guys in my prediction way before, as I broke down all the stuff from the spinoff. Onago was in the spinoff, obviously. We are going to see hidden wrinkles, things we never saw in that manga. There's going to be a new power-up that he never got to use, and this is it. Only by way of the sword god Susano. The sword god knew in that moment that he had truly awakened his demon child. No, the true sword demon within. And we get perhaps one of the coldest panels in Record of Ragnarok history, especially as a split screen of the two faces of the warriors. We see Susano on one side, visible sweat on his face as he knows what's to come, as he says, I am hyped, I am pumped, I am ready. And on the other side, we look at Okita's face that only reminds me of Shigaraki. It looks as if his skin is cracking, tearing apart, flames emitting off of him. It almost looks like decay as he screams out at the top of his lungs, I am going to break you. And that is the chapter. What a fucking chapter. Next month is gonna be unbelievable. We've still yet to see what Okita's Valkyrie is at this point. I don't know what the fuck is gonna happen now. Like, are we even gonna know? Are we ever gonna get this reveal? Is he gonna pull out that second katana? I have no clue, but this chapter was amazing. Is it my favorite chapter of the fight? No, because truthfully, you know, Record of Ragnarok is the king of making one attack seem like it's the end of the world. Like, if you really look it down and break it down, we really had one attack that took up the entire chapter. There was other chapters of this fight where it was just straight action that was super fast paced. But the way that this was presented, I love that they can convey just how serious this moment was, how serious this attack was, and how Susano is the catalyst that brought Okita to new heights never seen before. This is exactly what Okita wanted. He wanted to go and fight to the death with everything he had, which he was robbed of in his life. He now has it. How will he counter next chapter? How will Susano, in kind, react? Can't wait. Make sure you guys are subscribed for all the coverage of Record of Ragnarok. Preview and predictions for Chapter 91 will be out. And next month, not only are we going to have Record of Ragnarok, but we're also going to have that Apocalypse of the Gods spinoff that I talked about in my video yesterday. A new tournament, perhaps, and God versus God fights. I'll see you guys then. Peace.